hardcore Lync analytics. Thank you all for coming. I, for one, didn't expect this many people to show up, so clearly it must be an interesting topic for everybody, which is very good. I will start with an introduction of myself. So my name is David Tucker. I am the CEO of Event Zero. We've been a Lync customer actually for a long, long time. Actually, I refer to myself as an OCS customer. We've been using it for so long now, I've just forgotten that it was called OCS. About 2 years ago, we started looking at what Lync was capable of doing under the hood, just in terms of analytics, to understand what our business was seeing, things that we were noticing that were happening that were sometimes not good, sometimes very good, but really just drilling in and looking further and deeper into what was going on. So we actually have, for the last year, been very, very focused on Lync analytics. So we thought we would come here today and share what we've found and what we've seen and how easy it can be to do with anybody that wants to look at it. Over to you.
So my name's Shane Hoey. I'm a Lync MVP. My background is managing Lync for the last probably 2 or 3 years. I was a PowerShell MVP until the beginning of this year, so now I've swapped over to Lync. So my background is PowerShell. We'll have a bit of PowerShell today. But that's my background, so it's administering Lync, integrating Lync. Whoops, hit the wrong button. If you haven't worked out, we're Aussies. So I'm really bad with the slang, and often I'll be talking to people who get blank looks. So, you know, if I start talking Aussie slang and you guys aren't understanding it, pull me up, because it happens to me all the time. Yeah, whenever.
Many times a day.
Yeah. Oops, we didn't hit start. Damn. Okay. I keep hitting the wrong one. All right, so lots of comments on our title. So we believe we've struck a chord with everyone. I mean, we've got a full room here, so that's really good. What do we mean by hardcore Lync analytics? And for us today, we're not going to dive too deep into too much analytics. Instead, we want to show you what Lync can give you and how you can get at it. We're going to start with an overview. We're going to show you how you can do this. We're going to finish it off with a demo. That demo, just to give you ideas what can be done. Okay, so time for a disclaimer. Whoops. We have a lot of information stored in these databases, right? Lots of personally identifiable information that could be considered and, well, is considered confidential information. So there's lots of consideration you have to do when you're starting to really look at the analytics here. For example, expectations of the staff in regards to how far you're digging into their data. Local laws, where the people are residing. State, federal, or international. So Lync systems can span states, federal, and international. So those local rules, those local laws will apply. IT policies, HR policies, other corporate policies also come into play as to how much you can look at this data. So be careful. There's so much data in Lync. You know, you can become your own mini NSA. Just make sure it doesn't end up on WikiLeaks. There's a lot of information there. So, hit this keyboard. Okay, monitoring versus analytics. We're going to throw to the crowd here. We just want to get what your idea of monitoring versus analytics. So if someone wants to start, anyone?
And we have a wonderful little prize if you get it right.
Trends? Yep, cool. You get a prize. Anyone else? You get a $10 Skype card too. Oh, come and grab your Skype card later. Anyone else? No? Okay. So what we mean by, in Lync, the term monitoring really refers to monitoring data and analytical data. But what we want to do in this session is focus on the analytics. Done it again. So Lync Analytics is all about the data that's produced from the Lync usage, such as call records, quality of experience information, etc. Once again, why do we want to invest in hardcore analytics? Why do we need to do this? Anyone want to? We've got a koala. Anyone?
What would you like to get out of your analytics?
ROI. Monitoring my bandwidth use and making sure the call quality to all 300 plus of my sites work.
You two come and grab a koala later.
Yeah, I can't throw that far.
Yeah.
Proactive instead of reactive.
Sorry?
Got to be proactive instead of reactive.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I got it right that time. So we've got things like congestion, routing, utilization, monitoring, metrics, all that type of stuff. Everyone wants to see call quality, bandwidth, call statistics, metrics, but Lync data has a lot more to that, and it goes way beyond that simple analytics views. As an example, we've been exploring ways of identifying things like office romances, who's calling who. Employees,
That's real.
Yeah. Employees who are about to leave your organisation, you can determine that they're about to leave, by some of those metrics. Other things are employees talking to your competition, and of course data leakage. So we can work out if there's any data leakage possibly happening. Could be to media and things like that. There's only so much we can cover in an hour, so we're really going to concentrate on showing you on how to access this data and start to analyse it. But like we said at the start, feel free, you'll see us around in blue shirts, come and ask us questions. We're happy to dig a lot deeper in this stuff. So where do we start? All right, where do we start?
Okay, so I'm going to get around here so I can point a little bit. Sorry. Sorry if I'm putting my back to you, just think that that's the other side. Okay. Okay, so what we have here is really a very simplistic Lync 2010 deployment. We have some internal clients, we have some external clients, edge pool, Lync front-end pool, monitoring, database. Reasonably simple. Most people have seen this before. So most of the data that we look at actually comes in SIP packets. The calls, all of the voice data, it's all embedded inside SIP, along with monitoring. So we have QoE packets that are sent inside SIP when calls finish. That then is sent to the monitoring server with the Microsoft message queue, and inside that is the monitoring data that we're looking at. And that in turn, with SQL, goes out to your database. And you have the same on this side. The only difference is it's being proxied through an edge server. And then in 2013, everything looks almost exactly the same. Only this side here has changed a little bit. So we have all of the same SIP packets and things flying around. Just that the SQL now is written directly from the Lync server itself straight over to the databases. So it's just simplifying things. But when you're looking at the analytics, I will stop facing that way now. So when you're looking at the analytics itself, there's some important things to know. And this comes up all the time. All of our customers have this problem. When you're going from 2010 to 2013, you run into this stuff all the time. So the first and most common one really is that the data is written at different intervals. And it's not really understood very well, this fact. But what it does do is it changes your statistics instantly on the fly. So there's records written during calls in 2010. In 2013, that bandwidth is shrunk. It was an optimization. but it now only writes it at the end of calls. So you don't get the same, if you're querying data, you're going to get completely different statistics sometimes, particularly based on call volume, whether you're in 2010 or 2013. And if you have both, it then gets really tricky. There's some database schema changes as well. Very slight differences there. It's pretty subtle, but what we have found is that in a lot of cases, there's records that go on caller and callee, as well as the call records, the main call record itself. And a lot of that data moves around between versions. It's added and taken away and things like that. So sometimes when you write a query for one and then you run it in the other, you get different results. Obviously, as I mentioned, the monitoring role's removed. It still does the same thing. It's just slightly moved across. And we lose the message bus. And one of the really important things is that we gain SQL mirroring. And why that's important, I've learned this the hard way. If you have a very, very high volume, high throughput system, querying the primary database, bad. Querying a backup one, it's still not great because you should really be doing it somewhere else. But querying the backup one, you're not putting load on the primary and making a nuisance of yourself. So Lync, I'm sure everyone's seen this. Lync has built-in analytics. You deploy it when you deploy Lync with SQL reporting services. We'll do a very quick demo of that a bit later if anyone's interested. But what we're talking about here today doesn't require that. All of this data, as long as you have monitoring services deployed, is actually in the databases. You don't need reporting services to do any of this. Back to you, Maestro.
Back to me. All right, so let's have a look at going hardcore. So pieces of the puzzle. So first of all, we're going to set up our monitoring servers. Then we're going to understand the data sources. Now, the data source doesn't need to be just the monitoring database. We can get it from HR databases. We could get it from Active Directory. We could get it from the Lync policies itself. So it comes from many data. So the data comes from many sources. We then look at visualizing the data. So that could be as simple as creating a CSV file, importing it into Excel, and making a nice, pretty graph. Right? Excel's great for doing some visualization tools, and I'm pretty sure everyone in this room has used Excel. Right? So using some standard tools. Or we could get as complex as 3D visualizations over time, calls over time. And then baseline, I'm going to touch on baseline a bit after, but once we've done that, we should always grab our baselines. We should know understand how our environment runs on a good day. Setting up monitoring. Thanks, I keep hitting the wrong one. Setting up monitoring, look, it's really easy. We enable monitoring in the topology. This is associated front-end pool. We publish the topology, including installing the database. Configure call detail recording and the quality experience in either PowerShell or the policies in PowerShell or the control panel. Important thing is to think about the purging of records from the databases. So you really need to think about that. How long you're going to keep the data for? Is there any legalities around how long you have to keep the data for? Or can you just purge it? The monitoring, not so much. The legalities are more around the archiving. Yeah. And of course, install reporting services and deploy monitoring reports. Look, if you haven't done this yet, there's a really good, on Channel 9, they have a really good video on it. I think it's Brian Ricks, another Lync MVP, talking about it. Alternatively, once again, come and talk to us. We can demo installing it. We've got a virtual machine. We could show you how it's done. All right, so accessing the monitoring data. The main sources are the LCS CDR database for the call details, the LCS logs for all the IM archives, and the QoE metrics. But there's more areas we can get some valuable information. The main ones are the location information, the call park data, the response groups, and some of the address books. Word of warning. Once you start playing around into this area, you've got to be very, very careful and know what you're doing inside of the SQL. This is configuration items. A lot of it's in XML, stored as XML. So if you start editing this data, you could find yourself in a bit of trouble. So understanding the data, the schema. So for call detailed records and the quality experience, that's all up there. We haven't got time to really go into that. If you're going to be doing this analytic data, you need to understand that. As well as for developers, there's a lot more on MSDN. I just want to stress this, learners beware, right? So, as you can see, that procedure that's running there, so, okay, so...
Don't try this at home.
Yeah. We really want to stress this, that you've got to be really, really careful what you're doing, and that's why. So those three databases at the LCS log, the QoE metrics, and the LCS... Just go back to the slide. Sorry, the LCS CDR, the LCS log, and the QoE metrics, what happens with them is the data is pushed to them. There's no configuration items in there. So you're pretty safe if you're just querying those databases. If you're doing this, so there's a lot of stored procedures there. So when you run the PowerShell command, I think it's install CS database -clean tables, it's actually running their stored procedure. And as you can see, delete from everything. So if you're doing this stuff and you're going to start querying these databases, please make sure that the account you're using only has DB data reader. Because if you don't, your Lync environment will be not the best. So yeah, really, yeah, I've talked enough about that. So don't do it on production first, test. So make sure you run all this stuff up in a lab if you can. Labs are easy to implement these days. Stick to the CDR and QoE databases. Yeah. And please, yeah, don't use production servers. Yeah, you get the idea. You guys get the idea. All right. Okay, so when I was talking before about baselining, what do I mean by that? So we built the analytics. What we want to then do is we want to build a repository of network captures, snooper logs, showing what takes place in a normal working scenario. We then capture performance baselines that can be used to compare performance should things turn bad. Create some PowerShell scripts to check for health, check for error event logs, that kind of thing on your servers, especially the edge and also the reverse proxy as well. Use things like System Center to monitor your environment. Just, keep an eye on what's happening. Read your reports. Don't just write a report, go, that's cool. Read your report, understand it, understand what's going on. Choosing the most appropriate tools. So we've got PowerShell, we've got SQL, there's a lot of third parties out there. There's Excel, right? Excel's great for doing visualizations. So often we can overcomplicate things when we could have used a simple tool. So really think about what tools you're going to use. And finally, just make an action plan for when you're noticing call quality or something like that going a bit. Make sure you've got an action plan so you know what to do. All right, let's do it. Oh, we've got to switch.
Yeah.
Which number?
It is 8.
Awesome. You can look here.
Sorry. Oh.
So this is our test lab environment too, by the way. So,
which is in Australia, so
Yeah.
it's understandably a little bit slow from here. And of course, it's going to play games on us today. I think we have so many people
There we
here,
go.
so many
It's up.
smart people here
It's
that they're consuming all our bandwidth.
Tab. Oh,
Sorry?
it's all right.
I was just quickly going to show you how to get to that if you had not seen it before, but it is not working for us.
We'll give it a miss.
Yeah. So this is just the statistics that we have seen before. Once you've got reporting services installed, it is very, very easy to get to.
One thing with that too is you can export to CSV, you can export to, you can also, I think, PDF. So there's ways to export the data out of the monitoring. So we'll flick back. What's next? Okay.
Now the good stuff.
Yeah.
We'll stop boring you with slideshows now.
You talk.
Yeah. Okay. So this is actually just a snapshot that we've taken out of one of our tools. It's really, really simple, but what we're going to do here is actually show you how to get this information, where to get it from, and actually create a tool that everyone can use and download and modify and change. And we're going to do this right here today. We're going to show how easy it is. So what we're going to do here is actually, is there any SQL experts in the house? Great, I won't look like so silly. I really need to go around that side again.
Go around that side, yeah.
Sorry. Big desk in the road. Okay, so just really, really quickly, this is the actual SQL that produces that list, and the only modification to it is that instead of having proper names, we're just looking at the user URI. So it's really simple. Number of calls, number of minutes in seconds, and then the user. And we're looking here at session details table. We're only looking at voice and video. We're grouping by a user. And the reason why there's two of these, and this is a gotcha that most people take a couple of goes to get as well, is that there's two sides to a call. You can make a call and receive a call, and Lync records both of them. So if you're looking for the top caller, you actually need to look at both sides of that call. And then we just group down here just to make it a little easier to see. So if you want to flip over.
Yep. Oops, where's my mouse? All right, the good stuff, the PowerShell. Why is that going like that? Oh no, what's going on? Is that your? No. Sorry, guys. This is not good. Yeah, actually, hang on a second. Let me just try. Oh, this worked a minute ago. No. Okay. Can you see that? Cool. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so PowerShell. I did warn you. Who uses PowerShell? Show of hands? Yeah, so you all know it. It's Lync, you have to use PowerShell. So first thing we do is we don't have to import the modules anymore. So with PowerShell version 3, we no longer have to import the modules. But in this case, just to speed things up, I'm importing the modules. So the SQL module is installed as a part of the SQL client tools. So you'll need to, if you're going to do some of this PowerShell, you need to install those SQL tools. So the SQL module is installed. If we have a look at the SQL module, we've got about 30 SQL commands we can use. So it's one of the smaller modules out there compared to, I think, Lync is about 700. Really, in this, we're only, so we can back up databases, we can do a whole lot of things. The main command we're going to be using is invoke SQL command. So it's a very powerful command. We can do a lot of things. We can also do a lot of damage. So once again, testing, testing, testing. We can do stuff, things on availability groups, and not really relevant at the moment for Lync. We also have a SQL provider. So does everyone know about PowerShell providers? Anyone? Yeah, there's a few nodding. So we have PowerShell providers. They're just .NET framework. They just help us visualize the data. Help us go up and down. Expose the. I'll start again. The data exposes as a drive, so you can change directories and so forth. So we can get onto our SQL data like we would, say, running in DOS. So, for example, I can go set location SQL Server, and I'm now in the SQL provider inside of PowerShell. I could run a directory or get child item, the PowerShell, and you can see what I can access. So there are a few things I can access: the SQL Server database engine, and data collection and SQL Server utilities and so forth. All right, so we're going to go into the database engine. So I'll just change directory into the SQL database. I'll look at another directory. So what you'll notice is that I'm connected to the local machine. Right? So this is the local machine. This is not my SQL server. If I want to connect to my SQL server, so my SQL server is called lydu-SQL01a/default, so default instance, we just need to do that. If you had a named instance, you would just put that there. So we're now on the SQL server, and we can now do a get child item, so a directory. And we're going to have a look at here, and we can look at all the tables and databases and tables and so forth. Does that make sense to everyone? Yep, cool. If we want to look at the tables, in this case, I'm going to just change directory to the tables. So I'm now on in the tables. Do a directory, so you can see all our tables. So dbo.frontend as an example. So if we want to do a simple SQL command, we can just say invoke SQL command, query, and it'll query the database. So it's just made a database. Now we don't have a lot of records on this particular database, but as you can see, it's listing all the session details. If we have a bit closer look at it, so if we look at it, PowerShell using getMember, so you can see, so everyone knows that PowerShell is object-orientated. It returns objects. The data type is actually system data row. So whenever we query a database, it's always going to return with that. And there's a couple of properties and methods that we can use with that data. But if anyone's interested in that, come and see me later. Once again, timing. Okay, so here's our query. So what I'm doing here, just to simplify it, I'm actually storing our query in a here string. And our here string, oops, I'm jumping way ahead. Where did that just go? Whew. Okay, so we're going to store in a here string, so you can see the little ampersand, and then and then you can list it out just as you normally would in text. So it's and finish it with the ampersand at the end. Now, So F8, we got it. So you can see now our query is stored in that variable. We won't go. Okay. So generally speaking, when we're doing anything in the SQL, we're not going to be in that SQL provider. We're just going to run SQL. We're going to be on the C drive. So, yeah. So now what we're going to do, we're going to invoke a command. We're going to tell it what the server name is and the instance. In this case, it's the default instance. The database we want to query and our query. So remember that query is that here string from before. And there you go. So we've queried it. We've got the total number of calls, total minutes, and then the user, as you can see. This time, so we're going to do some stuff with that. So I'm just running that query, storing it inside a variable. Okay, so all I've done, so rather than constantly hit our database, we can actually store it on our local machine in a PowerShell, inside PowerShell. So I'm a PowerShell person, not a SQL person, so for me, I grab all the data, I grab it raw form, and then I can do stuff with it. So in this case, call volume, I'm going to sort by the total minutes in descending order, pipe it through, selecting the first 5. So by putting descending, I'm getting the first 5, and the first 5 I'm getting the number of calls, the most calls. Sorry, number of minutes in that case, or I can do the same in number of calls. Could do things like we could look at users who may have made, how many calls I've made in a day. Or we could target a individual user. So once here, I'm just looking at, I'm saying where the user URLi is equal to shane@linkdownunder.com. And there we go. We could also use a regular expression, so where user URI is like. There we go. So just on all of these wheres, you need PowerShell v3 to do your where like that. So if you do have an older, if you get 2010 and it's still v2, you need to just bear that in mind. It's real easy. We could convert that data into a CSV file using PowerShell. Right? So we got our call volume, piping it to convert to CSV. We give it a delimiter with no type information, and then we give it a file name. So we say the out file, call volume, CSV. I don't have Excel, so as you can see, we've got that. We now could open that up in Excel and do some visualization on it. We can convert to HTML, nice and easy. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm grabbing all my calls, sorting them by the number of calls in descending order. This time I'm putting an expression in there. So I'm saying select, and I've got an expression. So rather than calling user URI, I'm calling it name. I'm changing the name there. The same as the call volume. So rather than calling it number of calls, I'm saying call volume. In addition, we can also do some expressions in these select agreements, using the select object. So we're timesing it by 60, so doing total seconds rather than total minutes, just to show you that you can do calculations. We then convert it to HTML, give it a title, a heading, and some body. And once again, out file, straight to call HTML. And we open it up, and we've got a HTML. So we could also use send message, and we could just send that email, bang, right? So really easy stuff. We won't, and I do apologise about the colours on this one. We're doing exactly the same thing. So we've got the call volume, we're sorting, we've got our select object, just changing the object. Convert to HTML. Now remember, when I do convert to HTML, it's text. So then using PowerShell, I'm just going through a for each and then changing the table to colorise it a bit. And then I could, rather than doing out file once again, I could say send it to mail. And if we look at that now, so there you go, simple as that. Any developers? No. Okay. Jason, you might be able to explain it better than I can.
It's just an easy way to get data between different services.
Yeah. So we can convert to JSON now. It's either PowerShell 3 or PowerShell 4. I just can't remember exactly which one. All right, so we've got the same query here now. So we're going call volume, where the number of calls are greater than 5, sorting them by the number of calls. You're going to notice I've got a little bracket here. Once I've done the sorting, I'm putting them to outgrid view. Okay, so outgrid view gives us a nice little GUI we can choose people from. And then I've got the output mode of multiple, so it's going to allow me to select multiple users. I've got the brackets there, that's going to run first, and then it's going to return just the user URIs of the people we select. So for example, so you can see it. So we can now do stuff with those people. So for example, we could move them. We could then just put into like a for each, and we can move those users to another server. So move users. I'm doing a what if on this, so I don't want to move them. So once again, select those users, click OK, and now our what if will run. There you go. So you can use the analytics to work out and move your users around the place. Okay. Now some really cool stuff. Still PowerShell. So we talk about third-party tools, and Sapien, unfortunately you can't see Primal SQL 2012. This is a really cool tool. We've got the same SQL as we've been running through on every demo. The only difference in here, I've said use top 5. If we execute that, it's going to make a query of the database. Oops. Okay. And we get number of calls, total minutes, and so forth. Now, the cool thing about this product is that we can export the query to PowerShell, and then I'll just start Notepad. And it then exports the query. So you'll see there it's doing it as a query string, so we can export it and just paste it into our PowerShell script. It's got a couple other options there. We can export to C++, starting really a bit devy there. Export the query to HTML or VB. The one I really like, but is we've got a simple query here. And what I'm going to do now is export it to a query form. I should mention too, we can also there export straight to PowerShell. We're going to export to a query form. So I'm going to choose PowerShell. I select, and it's going to prompt us to save it. So we'd normally just save it. I've pre-prepared one. What we then do is we jump into another tool by Sapien. So this is Sapien's PowerShell Studio. And what you'll notice is when we start diving into this, it's no longer using that SQL provider. So it's now generated it via .NET. Right? Now, as an IT pro, I'm going to struggle writing this type of stuff, but you can see there how easy it is. The one thing I didn't mention, which I should have, notice on the side here we can access our procedures, our tables, our views. We can in this also just right-click and say generate PowerShell script based off those views or tables and so forth. So it's a really, really easy way of getting the data out. Okay, so for a moment here, and the reason why I love this program is we have this export, and we can package this as a file. So we go package and run. Right. Now, first things, we want to make sure it's PowerShell version 3 because of the auto loading of the modules. We then give it a platform. In this case, we want to say 64-bit forms. You can fill out the other stuff. You can sign the executable. So if you've got a signing certificate, make sure it's signed. And you'll notice there too, you can also execute it as different users. But we'll just build that. Actually, I won't build that. So you click build, it goes off, it takes about 30 seconds, and it builds. So what we've now got, once we've hit build, is this, a little application. So we can now give this to HR department or whoever. And remember, this query could be anything. We click query, it's going off, querying the database, bringing that query that we built. And as simple as that. So if you had hundreds and hundreds of people, then you can just sit there, and we've only got 5, but we could then search. You could modify it, you could make it so that you could select those users, move the accounts and so forth. So, a couple of simple tools that you can do. Back to...
Yeah. Just one thing I'll add there as well. Up until Shane switched to the Sapien tool, all of those queries that he was running were cached. There was one query at the start, and everything else was happening in PowerShell. So we didn't have to go back and requery the database every time. It's just PowerShell doing that work. So it's a really, really cool interface. Okay. So as we're going through here, we're getting a little bit more progressively difficult. So we'll end up with something that is a little bit better at the end. So, but we're trying to ease everyone in. So what we're looking at here, I just took a snapshot. Again, this is another part of one of our tools. But what we're going to do is, oops, that's the wrong pointer. I'll use this one. We're going to rebuild this. And we're going to do it in Excel. And I'm going to do it really quickly. You wouldn't imagine how quick this can go. Okay. I think my VPN is running there. So this is plain old Excel 2013, nothing fantastic, nothing great. Well, there's nothing different about it. It's fantastic and great. I actually kind of use it every day of the week. But there's I've done nothing special to it. So one of the really great things here in 2013 is that you've got access to different data sources. Now, you might expect that this is where I'm going to go, but I'm not. It's a little bit tricky sometimes. What I want to do is put free-form SQL in. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to create a new data source. I'm just going to select the driver. Going to hit connect. So this is, again, connecting to another environment in Australia.
It's another test environment as well. So for those that can't see at the back, we've connected to the SQL Server native client. I think that's pretty easy. It may not be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Shouldn't have clicked there. Oh, there we go. Sorry, this screen is really small and my glasses aren't that powerful. I think I've got that right.
Yeah, and this screen's really blurry.
Okay, so that's going to connect to our data source. We don't really need to worry too much about what particular database we're connecting to, but I'm just going to tell it here to use the
There it is.
LCS. So that's just reconnecting again now. Okay, a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm not going to put a query in there. And I'm going to cancel here, and I'm going to cancel this. It looks like you're doing the wrong thing, but you're actually doing the right thing. And then also here where you would add tables, it's much, much easier just to click on here and add your SQL. So here's one I prepared earlier. This is in the slide deck as well. It's verbatim in the slide deck. All I've done...
You need to...
Yes, yeah, I will. All I've done here is, or in the slide deck, is that I have squashed it up so it fits on the page, because it was very, very small and no one would have been able to read it. So I'm just going to grab this. What I'm going to also do is I'm just going to drop it into SQL Studio here. So reconnect. So that's the same server. That's the output that I get. It's pretty simple. It's essentially, I'll scroll down here a bit. So we're looking at the session details table. We're joining it with some QoE information. We're just looking at a small sample of time here, so it's just got a from the 4th of the 1st, so that's a month and a bit. And again, we're excluding media types, or we're including media types here, but we only want voice and video because that same table has different sessions, IMs and things like that. And then all this stuff up here is really just SQL to put it nicely in little buckets that we can understand. And also, we're using one of the attributes of call records here, and we're just doing a little bit of math on it to make it 100, just to scale it so that people understand it a little bit easier. So that same query that I pasted in there, I'm now just going to drop into Excel. And so it's just produced exactly the same thing that SQL Studio did. And then I'm going to click on Close. And this has now imported that data into Excel. So it's really, really simple. As soon as you know what you're looking for and how to get it, you can pretty much do anything in Excel. And then once you've got that data, you've got the entire power of Excel right behind you. Right, so that's that same data produced in a 3D graph inside, I don't know, what was that, 5 minutes? And those queries can be as complicated as you want. They can produce any data. It's really, really easy to do. Do you want to flip back for a sec? Sorry, yeah, that's the SQL from the last one. We skipped ahead a little bit too quick. So we're going to do this. I really was hoping to be able to do this with the map, but I just couldn't get the tools finished in time. Excel has tools to do this. They're not built in. You need to add them on. But this is the same data that we're looking at here. What we're doing is looking at what devices are connected to Lync, where are they, and we're plotting that against known locations on a map. So we've enhanced the data a bit. We've added data sources here that gives us that information. So it's a little bit of a cheat, but again, this is the SQL. Now this is going to be a little bit small, and I do apologise for that. But can you switch back to here, please? Okay, so this is that same piece of SQL again here. So I've already created the data provider, and what I'm going to do is just change this connection. Now this will break the other one, so normally you would add multiples, but I'm just saving time. I don't really need to reinvent the wheel. So this is the definition, and this, you know, if you want to modify a SQL and just fix things, you can just go in there and change it, and that'll change that data source. And for some reason, this will ask me to log in twice. Not sure why it does that. So that's a version of that same data that we saw before. Again, this is a different environment. So I pulled the screenshot from a production environment that had lots more locations and data in it. And we also, to get this, we didn't quite have, well, in this database, we didn't have the actual subnet locations and things like that. So it's exactly the same query. You can use a bit of imagination, and you know, if you know where your subnets are, you have an instant mapping to a geolocation. And we use mapping tools on our products, Bing and the other one, to I didn't say it. Yeah, just to visualize that data, but it's exactly the same process. What I've done here is just pull it into Excel again because it was nice and easy and simple, but you get the idea. You know, none of this data that we're looking at is hidden. It's all available. It's really, really simple. Once you understand the schema and you've gone looking at some of those other Microsoft docs, you can get at all this stuff. Okay, we're actually going to...
Yeah.
Sorry?
You go.
We're actually going to swap back a little bit and do a bit of this in PowerShell again. So what this is a publicly available library, nothing spectacular. It's a JavaScript D3 library. It's open source. You can grab it, do anything you want with it. But what we've done here is created a query that looks at relationships between people. So there might even be some names on this one of people in the room, so just ignore the names. So we look at each call in the system within the time period we're looking for. We look at who they call, you know, who that person called, and then who they called. And what we end up with is a visual map of call relationships. We have, one of our customers uses this, well, thousands of times a day. They do charity work. So when people call in, they want to see inside their own organisation. It's filtered for internal views only, but you get a call come in and they want to see who else that person's called. So within a couple of seconds, they have a visual clue as to, you know, the state of that person that's made the phone call. So SQL's getting a little bit more complex here, and it's maybe getting a touch out of my depth. Again, it's a lot the same as what we had before. So we're just looking at call records here. We're not doing anything spectacular. We're just joining two sets of users. So there's an outer SQL select and then an inner SQL select and then a union in the middle of it. So it's just grabbing, you know, both ends of the calls and then adding a filter on the top. So do you want to?
Yep. So once again, we're just going to jump in across to PowerShell. Oops, that's not the one. Here we go. So once again, I'm just going to put it into a straight query. Oh, sorry, it's here string. And then simply run the invoke command. So this is one important thing you're going to notice here. So you can see that Shane rang Ben. Ben rang Shane. Melbourne rang Shane. The important thing here is actually what's going on in the back end and where that SQL is coming into play. So it's SQL. So if we go down to databases, tables, session details. Okay, so if we just select the top 1,000 rows, okay. In the database, you'll notice that user is actually stored as user 1 and it's got a ID. So we have another table with users. And then if we look at that table, so we have all our users with their user URI and their user ID. So often when we're doing this analytic data, we're grabbing the data from multiple tables. So we can do that in SQL Management Studio or even the Primal SQL. Primal SQL does have a nice little GUI where you can match things up and drag and drop and everything just happens. But yeah, just be wary of that, is that you might want data out of, in this case, the session details, but you're going to have to access other databases as well. So that comes back to that schema and how important learning that schema and reading that TechNet is, what that schema is all about. Pretty well much it for that one.
Yep. Okay, now I'm going to do a little bit of a demo of a tool that we've just finished. When I say just finished, the last build of this was probably about 20 minutes ago. So if it fails, don't blame me. And it's live. It's actually running at a customer site. So one of our customers, a company called WorkPack in Australia, they do employment services. So, you know, they job placement and all that kind of good stuff. They've got 40 or 50 sites around Australia, so it's isolated to Australia. I didn't ring a big international customer because I didn't want to be embarrassed. So these guys have been very generous in letting us look at their real data today. So this is coming live off their system right now. That's not it. Okay, so I did notice this morning that when I saw the last one, that I may have to refresh this once. Yeah, I'll just refresh that once more. There's some little timing bug in here that we haven't quite covered off yet. So this isn't in one of our typical tool frameworks at the moment because it is so new. And I also wanted to try and squash it up so that it fit on the projector properly, otherwise it was all out of whack. So what we've done here is basically plotted on a map of the world. We're just using standard technology. You know, we didn't invent that. We're using other people's stuff. Sorry. And we're looking at the balance of poor quality calls with good quality calls as they're happening. So we've got a couple of sliders up here. This is up to now, and if I leave this for a few seconds, it'll actually refresh in real time as calls are coming in as well. And I can move this back in time. And one of the really great things about this, and I've just seen this morning, but this side up here, you can see it's pretty bad. So the very thin green line means good quality. The big black dot means bad quality or poor quality calls. So a poor quality call, everyone knows what that is. You know, splutters and splats and missing audio and phase shift, you know, all that stuff. We have algorithms that we simplify a lot of that material down into one number, which is how we get this dot. But one of the really great things that I, as I said, I only just noticed this morning, if I move back in time here, that dot for Karratha changes. So that to me instantly tells me that the call quality there has actually only recently degraded, which means I can isolate particular aspects of calls. I can go back and look at them. So the point being that as you shift through time, conditions change. So you need to be able to look at those big chunks. So this is showing here 132,000 calls. So we're doing that in real time. And if you, again, leave this for a couple of seconds, you'll start to see calls pop in and it'll update. So this is an interactive map. I can squiggle around if they, because they're Australian-centric, there's nowhere else to go. But, and I highly recommend going to Australia too. I'm not a travel agent, but you know.
Some of these locations too, you'll notice with bad call quality, they are in the middle of nowhere. That's the one thing you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Not very good telco, not very good telecommunications is, not like it is in other countries.
It's better.
It's getting better.
It's getting better, yes. This particular site, I've actually been there, not to this customer site, but if you've ever heard the term the outback, well, this is out past the outback. It is a long way away. It's very, very isolated, and I'm surprised they have cars. We can also change the quality here, the threshold. So, you know, if you're not like us, we call 90%. That's our, if it's above 90%, we say it's a good quality call. If it's below, it starts to get iffy. So as you move this threshold around, you can start to see that the calls, the actual analysis of the calls changes. So in a normal scenario where you have an international organisation that you're looking at, you can zoom around here. I just sort of zoomed out a bit to look at Australia. If your geography is good, this is just zooming in on South Australia, so it's looking at that state. So when you have lots of sites that are close together, the further you zoom down into cities and so on, the closer you get to the sites. So I'm going to go down to a place that I've never seen, and this will just take a second to refresh. This is the mapping software that's slow here, that's slowing us down. So now that's just looking at sites. As you zoom in, you get different views of the data down the bottom here. So, and this does, as I said, we have sized this to fit on this screen a little bit. So there's stuff down the bottom that's you can't see there. So I've zoomed into an actual site, and this is in Adelaide, South Australia. And these are the calls. So these are, in fact, all of the poor quality calls in this site that we've looked at with the parameters, with the sliders. You can sort these if you want to look at a different version of the quality. So there's all the good quality calls. Click it again, you've got all the bad quality calls. So that's just looking at 4,000. So as we've narrowed down on the map, the search criteria that we're looking at has also narrowed. Which again, all of this is happening in real time. So these are our servers crunching all this data and showing this back in real time. We also have, so this will look a little small, but this is going to jump back into our normal tool. I can click on here and see a view of the user. So this is everything we know about the user. Just take a couple of seconds to show up. So we've got complete call logs, we've got timeline history. You can go back in time and see all the calls. I've got, sorry, I'll just come back here. So you want to drill down into the call itself. This is, actually I'll zoom in a little. So this is the call itself. A lot of this information here is the same as what you see in the Lync reporting tool. But we filter out some of the stuff that is specialist, you might say. you know, we're really looking at the macro view here more than the micro view. But you also have most of the same stuff. The important things that you really want to look at day to day, things that really affect the call. So you've got things like servers and pools, response codes for the calls. You've got diagnostics. I'll go back there in a second. You've got the user, what site they were located in. We actually do a lot of data enhancement in our tools as well. So we don't just rely on LIS. We have our customers enhance that database a little bit. So we get actual locations and we can do all our geographic mapping. And then just the normal stuff here. And you can also go and look at the endpoint. So rather than having a huge big endpoint report that, when you're looking at your QoE metrics, it's just squashed down and you put it on another page. We also then have the diagnostics for a call. It was a successful call. So, the packet loss here was quite high. So there's network congestion or something like that was actually causing the quality to be degraded for this call. But if you actually have a call that failed, our Smart Help actually drills right down into the cause of it. So when you go there, you'll see things like knowledge-based articles that can point you in the right direction and that kind of thing. So we go from the planet view down to the call and what drives the call, all in one tool. I didn't come here to talk about the tool, I'm just talking about the data layers. And all of this does come from Lync. Apart from that additional address information, that all comes out of Lync. We don't fudge any numbers, we just do that analytics. So if you want to switch back, I'll just give you a bit of background on how all that fits together. So one of the things that we do that is a little bit extra than just looking at the call database is that we do some SIP processing. So Lync itself does that. The call records are recorded. You get all the historical information, but what you don't get is real time. So you really don't know what's going on in real time unless you're looking at the SIP packets. So we use this technology that comes in Lync that does real-time SIP manipulation is the best way to put it. There's quite a number of flow patterns that you'll see with it when you get into it. You can consume messages. We do a few little tricks with it as well. So we take SIP packets that come in and we augment that with our own data. So we add session information to those SIP packets. That doesn't affect Lync, doesn't affect the throughput or anything like that. They're only tiny, tiny messages. But it helps us identify things much faster than what we can get it out of the call record database. We also do a lot of replace. So we sometimes see messages come in and we say, that's not really what we wanted, and we'll replace parts of that to enhance what it does. We have a couple of tools that do things like SIP URI replacement and stuff. So this is a simplified view of what we just saw running there at WorkPack. Up the top here, you want to point? So up the top on the right-hand side, we've got a database, so their system's all 2013. So standard database, nothing spectacular about it. We have a front-end pool, there's mediation servers, and then there's a number of their sites, larger sites that have their own SBSs in those sites, just for call balancing and things like that. You then have an edge, and then we've got our environment underneath that. So we have a connector that sits on the call database, and we replicate information out of that in real time. So as call records come in, different aspects of call records, different configuration changes in the system, because some of that affects how we look at SIP, we take that information out and we replicate it back in real time. We also have SIP proxies. So this is the SIP processing that I was talking about a second ago. that sit on front-end servers. We also do the same thing on their SBSs. So we're capturing all of this data in real time and pumping that back to our servers and doing that analysis that you just saw. Everything is totally seamless. When we put this on our systems, the impact is nothing. You install, so you can do this stuff, this SIP processing and the CDR without any downtime. You can drop applications in, pull them out. Not just us, but anyone can build these. And you can get that same information. So obviously we've taken the really simplified stuff that we showed you guys here today and just done it on steroids, because that's our job. Back to you.
Cool. All right. So just a quick recap of what we discovered, what we discussed today. So we started with the inbuilt reports. We then went to customizing with PowerShell and SQL, also using some third-party utilities. So you saw the Sapien utilities there. So both the Sapien primal script and also the XML. But then looking at it, so we also can extend with third-party utilities. And the point with some of that demo that we were doing, we were just doing we were doing queries. So it's I mean, that's the type of thing that you could do. Most importantly, look, be prepared for when things go wrong too. And by that I mean, make sure that once you start looking and analysing the data, that you continually analyse the data and know your environment well. Does anyone have any questions? I think we've got a few minutes left.
We've got about 5 minutes.
Go for it. Just jump up on the mic so everyone can hear.
Will the queries and PowerShell lines be online?
Yes, everything is already in the PowerPoint, so just download the PowerPoint. If you want that PowerShell, I'll give you contact information. So if you want the PowerShell script that I was doing, just email me next week. I've got to travel back this week. I'll see if I can actually get it up on the portal. So yeah, just email me or get me on Twitter, and just make sure if I don't respond, just bug me, because I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I get busy like everyone, and so just bug me if I do forget to email it back to you. Any other questions? Yep.
The tool you wrote for your customer, how many man-hours of development was that?
There's probably about 14 man-years to get to that point. We just scratched the surface, though. As I said, this is not about plugging my tool. This was about showing what you can do. But that, it's much further in depth than what I've shown.
Yeah, one of the things we really wanted to make sure that everyone walked out here was realising that you can use PowerShell, you can use SQL Management Studio, you can buy inexpensive tools like the Sapien stuff, you can query the database using the tools that we all have today. Everyone here put their hand up for PowerShell, so everyone will be able to run those scripts, query those databases. I'm sure most of your organisations have DBAs, and that was so you can go and talk to them and generate some of that stuff rather than doing it yourself. Questions anymore? Yep.
Inside the SQL query of the location script, you're grabbing subnet and IP. Was that what you were using then to match and set locations?
Yes, correct. And you can do the same thing with LIS, so you can get the data out of there. It was just easier for us to do it that way. If you'd like, I can give you a SQL query that does that. Or sorry, I can get someone that's smarter than me to.
We are going to be downstairs for questions, so if you've got any other questions or you'd want to go in depth in a bit more demos, we do have a couple other demos that we could go over. We'll be at the Microsoft stand.
I think so,
I
yes.
believe so. But yeah, any final questions before we
We have about 3 minutes, so
yeah.
Feel free.
No? Cool. Don't forget, fill out your Lync thing. Comments are good. Yeah, we take those comments and they're good. Good feedback. So thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
And hope you enjoyed it.